everybody, and welcome back to another episode of World Bigfoot Radio. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Duke Chat. With me, I have someone that I've been a fan and follower of for years, and he is not only a prime and principal paragon of perspicacity, but this man also evidences some of the most amazing and excellent elocution on YouTube. He speaks English better than he should, better than an English speaker. And this gentleman, in case you Bigfoot guys out there don't recognize him, is the founder and host of the Night Terrors channel on YouTube, which is an excellent and amazing channel. Bill does incredibly good research on all the topics that he covers on his channel. And so I'm thrilled and extremely happy, both of which are kind of the same thing, to have Bill with me on my show. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Thank you, Duke.
Great to have you here, man. You know, I've been
Good to be
following
here.
your content for years, and you know, you've gone through a few changes in format and wardrobe and all that kind of stuff, and everything has kind of been moving around a little bit on your channel, principally due to YouTube messing around with people. You know, they do it to everybody. I was kind of curious, though, and I always have been, how did you get interested in doing something like this to start with?
Well, it started off as a lark. I did like about 3, 4, 5 spooky stories, and the 5th one went viral. Well, not viral worldwide, but it went viral enough so I was getting enough views. I thought I could make an actual living doing it, and that's when I started doing it full time.
The Iceman of Minnesota. Is he related to Bigfoot? Is he just a sideshow freak? Or is he the missing link between Neanderthal and Homo sapiens?
Cryptozoology is the search for unknown animals, some of which happen to be monsters. One of the most familiar species is the creature known as Bigfoot.
But you may have never heard of the Minnesota Iceman. And that is odd, because in the year 2013, the remains of this creature were offered for sale to the public. In fact, the remains of the Minnesota Iceman are still being exhibited today.
May of 1967 is when Frank Hansen first exhibited in the Midwest his strange creature frozen in a block of ice. It was preserved in a refrigerated coffin, and the coffin lid was made of glass. Though the ice was partly cloudy, it was clear enough to identify the creature as neither ape nor man, but a curiosity that was halfway in between. This man thing was almost completely covered in dark hair, except for the face, the soles of his feet, and the palms of his hands. Coincidentally, 5 months after Frank Hansen's first exhibition of the Iceman, Roger Patterson shot his 16mm color film of Bigfoot in the wilds of California.
According to Frank Hansen, he bought the Iceman from sailors in Hong Kong. Sailors who had fished the huge block of ice from the water.
But others believe it may have been shot and killed in the jungle of Vietnam during the Vietnam War. In 1968, the remains of the Minnesota Iceman were examined by the Belgian zoologist Dr. Bernard Heuvelmans and American scientist Ivan Sanderson. Heuvelmans and Sanderson both said the Iceman was a real species, heretofore unknown. The muzzle of the beast was flat, like a human mouth, not protruding like an ape's. The toes appeared to be those of a human, and not an ape. When their bright examination lights began to thaw the ice, there came such a stench of decay that convinced the two cryptozoologists that the Iceman was not a gaffe, not a fabrication made for a carnival sideshow, but an authentic specimen of a dead proto-human. The Iceman toured as a sideshow during the 60s and the 70s. Then it disappeared for about 40 years. In February of 2013, the Iceman finally reappeared in an auction on eBay. That's when it was sold by a different owner in Cottage Grove, Minnesota. The asking price was $20,000. $20K. That's when the Minnesota Iceman was bought by Steve Boosty, owner of the Museum of the Weird, located in Austin, Texas, where this exhibit is on display now.
Sell your silver. Sell your gold. If you cannot afford the trip to Texas to see this exhibit in person.
I really enjoyed it. Like we were talking about before we actually started, I watch your channel all the time because you were doing these little short subjects. You take like one subject and you'd just research the living bejeebers out of it and do an in-depth dive in it, and you'd still manage to pull it off in like under 12 minutes. Usually it was like 7 or 8 minutes.
Right.
And then put in additional music and a little montage video at the end of it, and it was just unbelievably entertaining. I encourage everyone that hasn't seen this yet to go back to Bill's channel and check out some of the older short subject videos, and then you can start watching the newer stuff where he's live streaming, and he does like what, a 2-hour coverage of one subject. So it really goes in depth on it. And like I said, always does a great job. And, you know, you usually hear me slapping around armchair researchers. Well, we need them too. We need people that can actually dig around on the internet and find information and do a good job of vetting it and putting it together. So Bill is a large asset in the community and in the paranormal community in general, because he does this kind of deep digging on this stuff and then turns out a show on it. And he's been doing it for a long time, so he's really good at it. So there's heaping some more praise on your head, Bill. Go sub Night Terrors. To all my listeners, go sub Night Terrors. Cool channel. You will not be disappointed. So one of the things I always like to bring up to people, because I cover weird cryptids almost exclusively, but I do conspiracies and things like that. Another thing I love about your channel. And that you get it right almost, you know, like 99% of the time. You're dead on. I'm watching your show going, yep. Agree with Bill. Yep, absolutely right. Yep. And this is what I do. And I'm a field researcher too. So I not only do the online stuff, I'm out there actually doing the field research. And yeah, it's really refreshing for me to find somebody that's that good of an online researcher and archivist that they can do such a good job with it. So again, big plug. Go check out Bill's channel. But to finally get around to what I was going to talk about, some of the deep dives he's done on this stuff is stuff that's so out there that most people haven't even heard of it. And one of them that really caught my attention was your dive on the Manticore. That's one that most people don't talk about. And, you know, in Bigfoot Dogman circles, that's all there is out there. There's Bigfoot. Oh, wait, now there's Dogman. Okay, there's two things out there. What about all the weird classical cryptids that, who said they're extinct? So how did you stumble upon this Manticore thing and end up doing the video on that?
Well, I really should have watched this before I came on your show, Duke. I know we talked about it too.
And it was a long time. I know it was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, but yeah, it occurred to me that perhaps the appearance of the Manticore came in waves hundreds of years apart, and that we were just about to encroach upon one of those waves.
Yeah, you also had some information in there on how they had apparently managed to deal with exterminating these things in the past. And I think it was like every 300 years or so, if I remember right. Again, I haven't seen it in a while either. But since then, I've been paying closer attention to it, going, wait, if there's all this weird information on it, is this thing actually real? And one of the details that you mentioned is they had a roar that could stun someone. Well, 300-400 years ago, people didn't know there was a thing called infrasound. And we do now know that. And we know that several large animals can generate it. And tigers actually stun their prey by roaring at them with infrasound. So how did they get this notion 300 years ago? That's a little peculiar. And then another thing I came across recently was Praveen Mohan on his channel, and he covers archaeological things, old ancient temples and stuff over in India, and goes around and films all the carvings on them and tries to explain what it is that they're trying to portray.
Good filmmaker.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. Yeah, and everybody should sub him too, even though he's got like 3 million subs and doesn't care at this point. But his content's really good. He was going through this one temple. It looks like it was some kind of a temple to science or something. It was like a GMO factory. Every column at the top of it had an egg cell on it that had been carved into it. And then it had a depiction of the animal underneath it. And if you look at the animal's egg cell online, that's what it looks like.
Wow.
Okay, that's a little peculiar. The more peculiar part is that some of these animals don't exist, or at least they don't still exist. And they're really peculiar looking. And guess what? One of them looks just like a manticore, Bill.
Interesting.
Also, shortly, I'd probably say about a year and a half after you did your show on that, and of course I had always been interested in this because I know about all the classical monsters of mythology. Just kind of goes with the territory. I got a call from somebody that works with nursing home patients over on the West Coast, and they were doing an overnighter at one of their clients' houses, and they were just terrified. And they said, Duke, I just saw this weird thing. I don't know what it is. I said, what did you see? She goes, well, I went out on the porch, and this is like the middle of the night. She calls me at 3:30 in the morning. She just saw this thing. So 2:30 there. She says, I went out on the porch to have a cigarette, and everything was pretty calm. There was a little bit of wind, and I could hear this whispering sound. So I started looking where it was coming from, and down the street, about half a block away, next to this hedge, there was this big cat. And I went, so some kind of cat. She goes, no. This thing looked like an orange house cat, but it was the size of a lion. And I went, what? And she said there was more than one there. And they both had faces that looked like people. They were whispering something to each other. And then I don't know if it heard me or realized I was there, but one of them turned and looked at me. And as soon as it did, both of them just faded out and disappeared.
Wow.
She was terrified. So our manticore is just imaginary. She had no idea what a manticore was. I said, have you ever heard of a manticore? She said, no. I said, go look it up online, and I'll send you a link to a Night Terrors video that Bill did about it. And then she called me back about 20 minutes later, excited and a little bit more scared. And said, that sounds like that's what it is. Oh my God, I didn't know those things were real. And I said, I don't know they're real either, but apparently. So yeah, scary stuff. You never know when you're putting out some of this stuff what's actually going on with it, because sometimes you think it's just like, well, this is all legendary, and then you start finding out there's reports in the real world of people seeing these things or interacting with them. And your deep dive, apparently you dug up information from, again, 300-400 years ago, the last time there was a flap of these things appearing, on how they were getting rid of them, which is pretty handy. But you did mention at the end of the whole thing how, well, nobody nowadays really knows how to kill these things, so we could be in a bit of trouble here for a while.
Since the time of ancient Persia,
The manticore has been known as a man-eater. Every few hundred years, its population reaches a peak and becomes a threat to civilized man. In 17th century England, they believed this creature to be driven to extinction. But ever since 2015, fresh sightings of the manticore have been increasing worldwide. Scott Johansson of Fargo, North Dakota, woke up at 2 in the morning and looked out of his bedroom window. His neighbor had a motion-activated light, and it was on, illuminating the grassy lawn and the largest orange house cat he had ever seen, bigger than a riding lawnmower. The cat thing turned its head and looked up at him. The manticore's face was almost human, but with coloration like a mandrill. The creature tossed back its head, opening its mouth to roar, but its cry was completely silent. The only sound was a ringing inside Johansson's ears. Then he felt a crushing pressure at his temples, as if his head was in a vice. He covered his ears with his hands, but that did not help. Everything went black, and Scott passed out. Historical reports from the most recent manticore plague are 350 years old. It has the body of a lion and a human head, with 3 rows of sharp teeth like a shark. Assembled from a combination of the most efficient parts of earthly predators, the creature may be a genetically engineered pet, released on this planet in prehistory. According to old records, the manticore has a trumpet-like voice which can paralyze its victims. Perhaps this was an early interpretation of its psychic power to control minds. It is also said to devour its prey whole and leave no trace of its victim behind. In North Carolina, in a patch of woods near Highway 191, Reuben McGee and 3 of his friends were shooting squirrels with Reuben's shotgun. One said he heard a woman scream. Reuben said no, that was the call of a crow. Another said no, it was the sound of squealing brakes on the highway. The 4th man heard nothing at all. They saw a large animal thrashing in the gutter across the road as if just hit by a car. If so, the beast recovered quickly, because it started crossing the road toward the tree line, behind which the men were just out of sight. His friends freaked out and ran, disappearing along with his shotgun. Reuben stayed put, out of curiosity. The huge feline thing trotted smoothly into view. Its body was long enough to span 1 whole lane on the highway. Its fur was bone white. Again it cried like a crow, although Reuben knew the sound came from inside his head. The creature's head swiveled to where Reuben was hidden in the brush. The face looked like that of a baboon. Reuben decided to run after his friends. In 2010, one man in Sweden was on a camping trip when through the open door of his tent he saw the manticore. He heard the silent roar of the creature and passed out. He woke up in the morning with a ringing still in his ears. Swedish gun laws prohibit him from using a firearm. However, he does own a crossbow, and he has a new game plan. He will pitch his tent in the same spot. He will make lots of noise so the beast will know he is there. Even though it may make no difference,
He will use ear protection against its hypnotic howl. When it appears again, he will fire through the opening in his tent. And he says that after he has urinated on the corpse, he will sell the body to the highest bidder on eBay. Mankind has always been successful in beating back the pestilence of the Manticore. Unfortunately, information on how exactly this was done is lost to modern man. We can only hope that the hunters of our own era can match the skill, the awareness, and the persistence of those hunters of olden times.
For something like this, I understand now you're doing like a live stream on Twitch where you're showing some of your prep work, but what
Right.
goes through setting up to do a 2-hour live stream on one of these subjects every week?
Basically, it's each show, as you said earlier, is a 2-hour live stream deep dive onto a single subject, and I'll find enough for the 8 15-minute segments of which the show consists, and that's one 10-minute reading and one 5-minute section of a video that pertains to the reading.
So, and then after the fact, you take some of these segments out and you turn them into shorter subject videos and put them
Right.
up on YouTube too.
Right.
So
A lot
people-
of viewers told me that that's a good idea. I never realized it. I've seen other people do it, and I thought I might give it a shot. And a lot of people are saying they really don't have time to watch the whole 2-hour live show. So I release on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays at 5:30 in the morning Eastern time. I release 8 or 10-minute clips from the 2-hour live show.
Right. I've caught some of those as you release them because I work incredibly late night and I'm on the other side of the country. So I'm still awake when they come out. But yeah, and I think that's a great idea too, because a lot of people that maybe don't know what the content on your channel is and they see the thumbnail and go, oh, 2 hours. Oh, that, don't have that much time to donate or whatever. When they watch one of the short clips, they're like, oh, okay. Here's what's going on. Now I want to watch this because this is just a little segment to that 2-hour show, and it was really cool. So I think that's a great idea too. And now that they've got the competition from TikTok, of course, YouTube is trying to push everybody into doing 2-minute shorts too,
Right.
which is like, I've done a couple of them. I don't know what good it does or anything. And you can't. For me, it's more difficult because like, how do you explain something in just 2 minutes?
I've
Even
heard that they're approaching the popularity of TikTok. I've heard their shorts division is doing very well.
Well, yeah, essentially they're forcing everybody to do them or they're not pushing in the algorithm. So that could have something to do with it too.
Could be.
So when you're doing one of these shows, how do you pick a subject?
Well, lately I've been, I wanted to increase the subscribers a little bit. So lately I've been doing the best of. I go back a year and see what was really popular last year, and I'm reprising them right now, which is why I've been doing a lot of Lizardmen shows lately.
Well, we both know that's who's actually running California, so it's important that they know who their leaders are.
The generation of an Einstein-Rosen bridge allows instantaneous travel between one planet and another. The portal is in the shape of a ring, and one such device was found on Earth. Now under the control of the United States government, it is kept secret from the public. But this is not a fiction invented for movies and television. This is the true story of the Stargate, discovered in the country of Iraq. Nibiru is the 10th planet in our solar system, the so-called Planet X, whose gravity alters the orbits of Uranus and Neptune. The orbit of Nibiru around our Sun is long and elliptical, and the planet finds itself in the neighborhood of Earth only after traveling deep space for thousands of years. One close passage of Nibiru, 3,800 years before Christ, coincides with the first flower of human civilization in ancient Sumeria. The Sumerians invented writing. Cuneiform was pressed into clay tablets by the cross-section of a papyrus reed. They used cuneiform to record the law, such as the Code of Hammurabi, an eye for an eye. It was used in making maps, in documenting medicines and medical procedures, and to record history. Sumerian history attributes the overnight appearance of their civilization to the intervention in human affairs of an alien race, the Anunnaki, who came from the planet Nibiru. Before Nibiru vanished from the sky, the Anunnaki would share advanced technology with the human race. This included the installation of a Stargate on Earth. Professor Ernst Herzfeld, the German archaeologist, specialized in Islamic languages, history and architecture, and archaeology. He explored ancient Sumerian sites and collected pottery for museums in Berlin. He was falsely accused of dealing in antiquities, although later in life Herzfeld did support himself by selling off his own extensive personal collection. He was the first archaeologist to use photography to record carved rock reliefs in Iran. Most of the territory of ancient Sumeria lies within the borders of 20th century Iraq. While the region was under British administration following World War I, archaeological research flourished in Iraq for 2 decades. Dr. Herzfeld directed an excavation in 1931 in the province of Baghdad, where the Stargate was unearthed. The next year, the country gained its independence, and along with the British, the archaeologists were thrown out. A few years later, Ernst Herzfeld was forced to leave his university position in Berlin because of his Jewish descent. It was not until Saddam Hussein assumed power in the 1980s that the Iraqi government decided to finish what the Germans had begun. At Nasiriyah is located the Great Ziggurat, or Pyramid Temple of the ancient city of Ur. The Ziggurat of Ur contained the Stargate, and Saddam wasted no time in assigning a team of his own scientists to restore the device and get it working again, under the cover of restoring the temple itself. It took them 20 years, but they succeeded, shortly before the September attack on the U.S. by terrorists from Saudi Arabia. Normally, mainstream politicians would have no knowledge of the existence of advanced alien technology on Earth. However, the CIA is privy to this information. Before George Bush Sr. became President of the United States, he was the head of the CIA. He would share his knowledge with his son, George W., who would also be elected president. The George W. Bush administration made use of the September attack as an excuse to start a war with Iraq. The real reason for the war was to gain control of the Stargate. U.S. forces physically moved the portal to the Green Zone in the city of Baghdad, where it is currently secreted in the basement of one of Saddam's former palaces.
Amen.
Well, they're supposed to be under, where is it, Bill, that they're supposedly living?
Underneath Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. No, I can't see Los Angeles being controlled by lizard people. Okay, I retract my previous statement. They're not actually running California. They're just running Los Angeles. Makes you wonder, though, huh? And what was the deal with that guy with that whole tunnel system and all that? You want to briefly go into that? Tell people what it was?
Yeah, sure. There's a gentleman from 1933 to 1934. He was a mining engineer. So his job was to look for precious metals, basically. He invented a device to help him do this. It was called a radio X-ray machine. And he used that to find voids beneath the earth underneath Los Angeles. And he prepared a whole map of the voids. And all these tunnels were interconnecting. And because his device also detected precious metals, he could tell that there were gold plates in some of the rooms. And according to the Hopi Indian legend, which he researched about the area, supposedly these were produced by the Lizard Clan, which wrote down the history of humanity and of the Mayans on these gold tablets.
Interesting. I don't know if you've heard about it, but the Hopi are currently involved in a lawsuit with the federal government over a big chunk of land that's their traditional land in the Grand Canyon, which is the same chunk of land that has all the peculiar Egyptian-sounding names attached to it.
No, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, it looks like they're probably going to win it too. So
good.
Might be, yes, it's about time for that stuff to come out too, because the Hopi say that's where they came from. They were down there until the last disaster, and then after the disaster was over, that's where they came out on the surface again. Wow. And the Navajo have another similar legend that they also were underground and came up after the last disaster, but they don't. Their point of entrance onto the surface isn't the same one. But a bunch of these tribes there in the Southwest all have the same legend. Like, oh yeah, well, everything bad was happening last time. We were underground. When it was over with, our allies underground said, okay, it's over with. You can go back to the surface again.
There's supposed to be, I think, 3 underground tribal areas. One's under LA, one's under Mount Shasta, and according to the article, the 3rd one is unknown.
Yeah, Mount Shasta, that's one where you have the attribution to remnants of the Lemurian colony being the ones that set up shop in the lava tunnels under Shasta. Took that over a long time ago when Lemuria sank. And of course, there's all kinds of sightings of UFOs and various cryptids and whatnot there, Bigfoot being one of them. Due primarily to location in the Pac West, where there's plenty of Bigfoot anyway. So it could have nothing to do with them whatsoever. It's just like, oh, it's Mount Shasta. It's in the right place. It's covered with forest. So Bigfoot are there, of course,
Of course.
But there are people that see UFOs around the mountain really frequently. And there's some well-known areas up there that if you want to go get your pants scared off, there's usually some kind of paranormal activity going on. I got friends that do that for a hobby. One of them's going to be up here again next week. He's driving up from California to spend a week out in the woods with me, walking around, hanging around with Bigfoot, looking at 6-story tall tree structures and things like that. So
sounds fun.
Yeah. Well, he came up last year because he wanted to check out if I was a legit researcher or not. So he drove the 20 hours up here. And like you just said in the chat room last night, so now I'm driving the 20 hours up there again because he is the legit researcher. He discovered that. He wasn't quite sure Bigfoot was real either until he was up here, and now he's like 100% convinced. What do you think just pushed that tree over right over there? Well, yep, wasn't the wind. The other 3 trees in the same stand of trees weren't moving around. Just the top of that one whipping back and forth, and then kaplooey. Right. This is like an 80-foot lodgepole pine too. It's not some little twig. That was just across the road from camp up on the hillside. You could see the top of it swaying back and forth too as we're watching it going. Well, that's not natural. Kaplooey, the tree goes over. Somebody's trying to get our attention. Anyway, that's the area we're going to be back up in next week, and then we're going to make a side trip to, I don't know if you're aware of it, but apparently there are megaliths here in Montana. I've been getting scuttlebutt about this for a few years, and there's a lady that has a web channel, Megalith Montana, and she actually knows where some of these things are, and she'll take people out and show them to them.
Nice.
And well, except for the fact that she conceals the location, she charges the people to take them out there, and it's on state land. So she's already been warned not to do that because that's illegal.
Is
You
it?
can't charge people to take them on tours of state land.
Really?
Yeah, if you do
That
that,
doesn't make sense.
yeah, if you do that, then you're paying kickbacks to the state in order to do it, which is why I don't charge anything to do Bigfoot research, no matter where we're doing it, because then they can't do anything about it. Because
That's messed up.
I'm not getting paid. Yeah, they've actually shut down Bigfoot research organizations too because they were taking random people, give us X amount of money. We'll take you in for 3 days, feed you. You'll get to see something probably, blah, blah, blah. And they're just like, you're doing that on state land. You need permit. If you don't have permit, can't do it.
That's
And
messed
they ain't
up.
going to give you a permit. So, that's how they stop it. So the way around that is you just don't charge anything, and then they can't do anything about it. Then they can complain if you have a drone up because you're not supposed to be doing that, but that's only if they notice you have a drone up. But yeah, lots and lots of fun dealing with the red tape and the constant interference trying to get anything like that done. So yeah, some of these underground locations, there's more than one in the desert Southwest because I've talked to the natives in the tribes down there, and there's supposed to have been several big undergrounds down there, and that's before we started building Dulce Base and some of the other stuff that we've got down there now too.
Right.
Which makes you wonder what was going on, especially if you think Phil Schneider was credible about how they were building more underground bunkers and stuff there, and they burrowed into a already existing cave system that had grays in it that weren't happy about it. There was a firefight. And that was back in the late 90s, I think, that was supposed to have happened.
Yeah, we have multiple witnesses to that Dulce base as well.
Yep, that's it too, and from different time periods and whatnot. I actually have a guest coming up here next month that's done a lot of research on that area for about 60 years. It's fairly well known. Not going to divulge the name right now, but all you guys that are into UFOs and underground bases and stuff are going to know who this is. So you got that to look forward to. And he's, again, the thing is popular right now, of course, on TV and whatnot is Skinwalker Ranch and Blind Frog Ranch and all these, Braddock Ranch, all these other different ranches where there's all this weird, peculiar stuff going on.
Right.
Then it tends to cluster in one part of the country. A lot of this stuff is down in the area with all the military underground bases and the, underground complexes that the natives say are down there and whatnot. So it really makes you wonder what's going on over there with them working on this stuff all the time too. Have you heard anything about that?
Oh yeah, I did a live show about Skinwalker 3 or 4 weeks ago. Skinwalker Ranch. They have the cattle mutilations out there associated with UFOs and perhaps actual skinwalkers from the Navajo tribe.
And that seems to me to be probable because I know a Bigfoot researcher from the Navajo tribe, and I talked to him about that. And he said the reason that ranch is like that is because it's cursed. Because originally the Navajo had that territory, and I believe it was the Ute tribe made alliance with white man and captured a lot of them and sold them into slavery, essentially.
Oh my.
And so suddenly they didn't like the Utes very much. And so they, since they couldn't be living there anymore, moved out of the territory, and their medicine men, according to them, had cursed that valley, especially that one area.
Wow.
So bad things would happen. And of course, the skinwalkers, that's a Navajo thing. So if they're keeping up the cursedness of it, you would expect to see skinwalkers showing up. But, that whole area could have been really strange to start with. It could have been that they had a big presence there because they knew there were stationary portals there. And for the skinwalkers, medicine men, people that wanted to have access to portals or something like that, could be why they were in that area to start with. So it's not necessarily that they created it. It could have already been there. And there's areas like that down in the Southwest too, where they've got big carvings on rocks that show a spiral. That's a portal.
No kidding.
And then the things around it, the weird things that they drew around it, those are things that have been observed either going into or coming out of the portal.
Oh my.
So it's like a warning sign. Hey, there's
Right.
a portal over here, and these big scary looking things are around here. Maybe you don't want to be here. it would be nice if they had interpretive signs like that for modern day people to know what that stuff was all about. But yeah, next time you see one of those spirals on a stone and see some of these weird creatures around it, that's what that's all about. That's a warning sign. Hey, there's a portal over here. Here's what comes out of it, or here's what goes into it. Either way, it's hanging around the portal. Bad spot to picnic.
I bet.
Go somewhere else unless you want to see scary.
Because argument continues today over theories of evolution versus the belief in creationism. One might be forgiven for thinking this is a completely modern debate. However, Charles Darwin published The Origin of Species in 1859. This may have set the stage for the destruction of the remains of giant humans in the early 1900s by the Smithsonian Institution, in order to protect the reputation of the theory of evolution. David Brody, author of The Oath of Nimrod, recalls from history of the mid-1800s. The American public imagination was captured by reports in the media of the bones of giants being found. These oversized humans were believed to have roamed the Americas in the pre-Columbian era, which includes all history before the arrival on the continent by Christopher Columbus. That is not to say that giants did not coexist with early Native Americans. Oral history of the first peoples speaks of a race of giants, with whom on occasion they would do battle. Eventually, some tribes of Native Americans would merge to combat the gargantuan foe. However, the enclaves of the giants tended to cover a lot of land. One such enclave dominated the Ohio River Valley, and evidence of their occupation proved plentiful. Even Abraham Lincoln was caught up in the hype. In 1848, Lincoln said, "The eyes of extinct giants, whose bones fill the mounds of America, have gazed on Niagara Falls, just as our eyes do now." It was common to see in the newspapers reports on excavations of giant bones and oversized human skeletons of lengths between 7 and 12 feet. Many of these digs were the accidental discovery of common farmers who, in the process of turning the soil of their fields, were confronted with remains of some human leviathan. The farmer would then send for the country doctor and the town marshal. Like others in his rural community, the farmer was most likely to be a man of religious conviction, a reader of the Bible, a believer that there were giants in the earth. As the pioneers of the 19th century tamed the continent, the urgency of farming supplanted all respect for Native American burial mounds. The sites where giant humanoids were discovered numbered in the hundreds. The country doctor may have measured the dimensions of the body. The local newspaper may have sent out a photographer to capture an image of the interred as it rested in the ground. After the skeleton was exhumed, it may have been exhibited in the town hall. This was before it became the vogue in archaeology to apply a preservative for the protection of excavated bones. On exposure to air, on account of the acidic content of the skeleton itself, a mighty specimen might crumble to dust within a decade. The Smithsonian Institution was reluctant to put these finds on display. The Institute was indifferent to, and sometimes willfully neglectful of, the idea of an ancient race
predating the occupation of North America by the first peoples. The idea was contrary to the narrative that the Smithsonian sought to preserve in its own version of history. They also preferred to promote the manifest destiny of European settlers, to occupy an entire country, displacing its Native Americans. At the same time, the Smithsonian was accepting donations of ancient bones from all over the country, examining and documenting these treasures using their experts in a field known as ethnology. How did so many specimens go missing? They can no longer be found in the Smithsonian collections. The records of analysis are gone, as are the logbooks, in which was recorded the dates when they received the remains of these giants, and the names and addresses of the donors who had shipped the precious cargo cross-country. A United States Supreme Court ruling in 2014 forced the Smithsonian Institution to release classified papers from the early 1900s, proving it was involved in a major cover-up of evidence, in which hundreds of specimens of giant humans were ordered by high-level administrators to be destroyed to protect the scientific consensus of the age, which just happened to favor the shiny new theory of Charles Darwin on human evolution. For 15 years, the news of one epic firefight has been circulating among American soldiers who served in the province of Kandahar. The enemy force was a single man, armed only with a pike. The man was of an ancient race so large in stature that his measurements would soon be officially recorded for the first time since the writings of the Old Testament. Afghanistan, 2002. A patrol of U.S. Marines goes missing in a remote area of Kandahar. A second unit of the Special Forces is flown miles from the nearest village and deposited at the last reported rally point of the missing patrol. They follow its trail on land for only a few kilometers when they find themselves descending the side of a mountain. The Marines travel single file, following a narrow path, centuries old, made by goats, which brings them to the mouth of a cave in the mountainside. The lieutenant in command was puzzled by the unusual amount of loose rock or rubble in front of the cave when he saw the rocks were mixed with bone fragments. Staff Sergeant DePaula was the man who found the field radio belonging to the unit which had vanished. It was crushed like an empty pack of cigarettes. They were looking at the site of an ambush. The LT immediately commanded his men to disperse, and it was his quick thinking that saved most of the men from the thing that now burst out of the cave. It was so large and moving so fast that for some odd reason, Sergeant DePaula thought it might be an elephant. It looked like a man, but it was 12 to 15 feet tall, with a red beard and flaming red hair down to its shoulders. They were taken by surprise, and nobody moved, until Corporal Markowitz charged it, firing his M4. Their Special Forces training and muscle memory took over, and the rest of the men emptied their weapons into the giant's gut. The Titan was bellowing and it took out Markowitz by thrusting a spear clean through the soldier's torso. Then DePaula called out, "Shoot him in the face!" The other troops took up the same call at the top of their lungs. The primitive looming hulk took multiple hits from M4s and 308s, none of which was slowing him down. He still had the first soldier on the end of his pike. Suddenly, the giant stopped moving and blinked his eyes as if confused. Then he collapsed, and the ground shook. The Titan was finally dead. The entire engagement had taken less than a minute. After the lieutenant radioed in their position, a CH-47 helicopter arrived. It could not land on the side of a mountain, but it dropped down a cargo net on a line, and the men were ordered to roll the giant onto the net, which required the strength of 2 squads to accomplish. It smelled like a combination of a skunk and a rotten corpse. The huge body was flown to a local airstrip, where it was transferred to the loading bay of a C-130 cargo plane for transport to a base in Europe. The Air Force pilot of this plane observed 6 toes on each foot of the beast, and 6 fingers on each hand, which was first recorded of giant men more than 2,000 years ago, in 1 Chronicles, chapter 20, verse 6. Its fingernails were pointed, the pilot said, and its heels were wrapped with skin or canvas, similar to a moccasin. Its odor was overpowering, as if it had avoided taking a bath for a decade. Also, the pilot estimated its weight at 1,100 pounds, just over half a ton. Chain of Command insisted the Special Forces unit rewrite their after-action reports to eliminate any reference to the size of the creature. Today, the military denies this confrontation ever took place. Even the death record of Corporal Markowitz has been covered up. But this event is said to explain why, when U.S. combatants are trained in cave fighting, instead of aiming for center mass, they are instructed to aim high in order to target the face of the enemy.
So yeah, that whole area is just amazing to me with all of the ancient stuff that they've got out there. You know, petroglyphs of dinosaurs and stuff. Well, how do they know what a dinosaur looks like? How do they have petroglyphs of dinosaurs? You know, I talked to my Navajo friend that's the researcher down there, and he said they've got words in their language for animals like raptors and saber-toothed tigers and stuff that's, you know, supposedly extinct so long ago before humans were here. Well, how do they have names for them in their language? Does that make sense? No. They're drawing pictures of them. They got names for them. What's that all about? Well, anyway, getting back to the megaliths here in Montana, not commonly recognized that there are any. We actually figured out where they were last summer, and my team went out and took a look at a few of them. And the whole area is about 80 miles of batholith, so it's just a big scattering of boulders for a long, long way. But they don't usually arrange themselves in what look like shapes that somebody put together. These things are so gigantic, even with modern day equipment, it would be really hard to put them together. Really, really hard. These things are absolutely gigantic. And one of them that they found, and again, we're looking at it going, well, is that what it seems to be, or is it just a natural formation? Was there a cliff here with big columns of rock, and the whole cliff crumbled away and just left these 3 columns right here with a capstone on top of them? That seems a tad unlikely. Well, we found out where it was, and we went over there, and my team actually, I haven't been there yet, but my team's been there a couple times and surveyed it. And there isn't a talus slope with these crumbled columns that fell down. There never were any there. And the other one is sitting like pretty much on top of this prominence, and like three uprights with round capstone on it. It's called the Tyser dolmen. And if it is in fact an actual dolmen, it would be the tallest one on Earth.
Wow.
And again, it's not even recognized as being the real deal. For whatever reason, nobody's gone surveyed it, whatever. So one of my team members last year when he was there got all curious about it and stood right in front of it. Here's the two uprights. I'm going to stand right in front of them two uprights, and I'm going to take a reading with my compass. Guess which way it's pointing? Exactly due north. So again, the chances of this being some random natural thing are getting slimmer and slimmer and slimmer.
Amazing.
As we're vetting it. I'm trying to get Robert Kreider from the Southwest to come up and check it out, because he's kind of an expert on that stuff down there, and he knows what the megaliths and everything look like. He's already looked at pictures and went, yeah, they look totally real to me. I need to get up there and take a look at them. So this is majorly cool. Usually I'm just running around in the woods looking for creatures that aren't supposed to exist, but now finding megaliths that very much do exist and are really, really likely to not be natural. That's pretty cool. So
yeah,
totally into it. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. I turned it out last summer. I think it's called Megaliths Complete. It was from like 3 different trips that parts of our team made up there, and filmed some of it. Very impressive, gigantic, and I mean gigantic stuff.
wow.
Individual stones that are 30, 40, 50 tons. Those are the littler ones.
Wow.
Yeah, you see pictures of it and it's like, wow, that's pretty cool. And then you see somebody standing right next to it and you're like, oh my God, that's huge. So fun stuff. Yeah, anyway, getting back to what's going on with your channel. What's your favorite subject to cover?
I probably like time travel the best.
I noticed you've done several things on that. What do you think? Has somebody figured out time travel?
There's a lot of questions, especially about events that have been documented about if someone or the other has been able to travel through time or to see through time. There's a device called the chronoscope, which is supposed to be able to see through time. Went back to the era of the crucifixion of Christ.
Isn't that what the Pope supposedly has?
Exactly.
He has the chronoscope. No, he doesn't deserve it. Give it up, Pope. Let some actual researchers take a look and see what's going on there, if there is such a thing. Yeah, back quite a few years ago on my channel, we did one on, and I just cannot think of the guy's name, but he was in the 1800s in New York, and he went out to like get a newspaper or something and just disappeared, never was seen again. And then about 40 years later, he appeared on a street corner, looked very confused, ran out into traffic and got hit.
Yeah.
And then when they checked his ID, it's like, who is this guy? All this stuff is like from 40, 50 years ago. Where did he come from? And everything they checked on it, like he had a stub where he had parked his horse in a local stable. He had the stub to go get the horse, still in his pocket. Well, that was like from 1 block away, where there used to be a stable 50 years ago.
Right. He had a couple of tokens on him for beer for an establishment that was no longer there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that really makes you wonder when stuff like that happens. Like, why would, somebody's got all this old antique stuff in their pocket and then they just commit suicide? What?
Well, the cars might have been much faster than is used to as well,
Well, yeah. I mean, generally, if you go back to the era, unless somebody was, galloping through town because they were trying to escape the local sheriff or something, you just didn't have that fast of traffic with horses and buggies. You had enough time to realize there was something there and get out of the way before you got hit. Right. And probably not so much with the modern automobiles. By the time he appeared again from where it was, he had disappeared too, which, makes you wonder, where was this guy for?
Rudolph Fentz, I think his name is.
That's right. I knew it was Rudolph something or another. Yeah, that was a really...
In June of 1951, passers-by on Wall Street in New York City took notice of a young man who appeared confused. Dressed in the fashion of a businessman from the previous century, he stood trembling but frozen to the spot in the middle of an intersection. A brush with a taxicab laid him low. An accident which would lead to the discovery of several pieces of evidence, which some now claim to be proof of the existence of time travel.
The young man had a full beard, and the kind of mutton chop sideburns that had gone out of style ages ago. He was taken by ambulance to Downtown Hospital in Manhattan. Unfortunately, this was a decade before U.S. hospitals would have intensive care units. This man passed away peacefully before he ever regained consciousness. Then it became the official duty of the NYPD to identify him. A case assigned to Captain Hubert Ream of Missing Persons. There was the name of a tailor in the neck of the victim's suit coat, a tailor on Broadway, of which no one had ever heard. Another label inside his silk top hat, from a hat store that went out of business at about the turn of the century. And the following items, which were found in his pockets. A well-worn bronze medal for coming in third place in a shooting contest. A copper token good for 1 beer, marked also with a value of 5 cents. It bore the name of a saloon which was unknown, even to older residents of the area. A receipt for the washing of a carriage and for the feeding and grooming of 1 horse, issued by a livery stable on Lexington Avenue in New York, at an address where now stood a high-rise office building. A few Indian head pennies and $7 in paper currency, of which the newest banknote was dated 1875. Business cards, which revealed the man's name, Rudolph Fentz, as well as his Fifth Avenue address. And finally, a letter, postmarked from New Jersey, and bearing the canceled postage of a 2-cent stamp. None of these objects showed any signs of aging. Fentz's fingerprints were not on record, and no one had reported him missing. Captain Ream conducted research into the location on the business card. It was the address of the Buckingham Hotel, which no longer existed. In 1923, the hotel was razed to make way for Saks Fifth Avenue. Rudolph Fentz's name was not listed in the 1951 telephone book, but further investigation revealed a listing for a Howard Fentz in a much earlier phone book from 1939. The police captain spoke to the residents of Howard's apartment building, who remembered him and described him as an old man with silver hair. He once worked as a short-order cook at a diner down the street. However, in 1940 he retired and moved away. Ream was told at the diner that Howard had passed 5 years earlier, but his widow was living in Florida with her sister. Ream contacted her by phone. She said that her husband's father, Rudolph Fentz, had disappeared in 1876 at the age of 29. He would take a walk in the evening, smoking a cigar, because his spouse believed that smoke was being absorbed by the living room curtains. One evening, when his son Howard was possibly 2 years of age, he left his family's New York City apartment with a lit cigar, and he never came back. They searched for him in vain, spending a great deal of money on a private investigator. No trace of him was ever found. With renewed interest, Captain Ream delved into ancient missing persons files in the dusty archives of the New York City Police Department. He finally located the pages of a report, yellow with age, on the disappearance of Rudolph Fentz. The description in the records of Rudolph Fentz corresponded exactly with that of the bewildered man who was struck on Wall Street. But after filing his report, Ream was compelled by his superiors to close the case as unsolved. The officer barely survived review by Internal Affairs as to his mental competence, and most of the captain's notes were stricken from the official case file.
What do you make of that? Do you think that was actual time travel?
Well, like I say, there's evidence out there that it has happened in the past.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder if some of the if some agency working for some government has actually got something like that, and that's what's behind the Mandela effect, them going back and screwing around with the time stream.
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah, oh yeah, I've heard of that theory. In fact, I have a Mandela episode coming up not this Saturday, but I think next Saturday.
I was kind of peripherally not all that interested in the Mandela effect until I actually watched somebody that had a lot of examples that they were just rattling off on a radio show, one right after the other. And he was going, okay, go to this book. It was the Bible. Everybody knows this passage. Go look it up. Your memory says it says this, but it doesn't.
The lion
anymore.
lays down with the lamb.
Yeah, and there was a couple
And
other
it's
ones
not
in
there.
Yeah, exactly. There was a couple
Yeah.
other ones in there where two or more are gathered together in my name. Now it says 2 or 3.
Oh, really? That one I didn't hear.
Yeah, go
Interesting.
look it up. So yes, there is something to the Mandela effect because they had those passages beaten into my head when I was a kid. I remember them exactly word for word. And no, I am not misremembering them along with millions of other people. So something's going on with this Mandela thing, in my opinion, because I've seen some real good examples of, yeah, there's something weird here is going on. Even changes in plants and stuff that plants that I saw a lot when I was a kid, and I go look at a picture of them now and go, what? Doesn't look like that.
Right.
Very, very strange stuff. Have you noticed any of that in your world, the Mandela effect stuff?
I've noticed there's I don't see milkweed anymore. There used to be tons of it around when I was a kid in this state, New York State, upstate New York, but I haven't seen one in ages.
Wow, milkweed is really hardy too. I mean, you'd have to like go on a campaign to exterminate it to get rid of that.
Right.
I mean, think about it. How would you get rid of the milkweed? It was like, it's just randomly dying out because it doesn't like New York anymore. What?
The sad thing is that's like the only food source for the state butterfly, the monarch here in New York State, and their numbers are dwindling.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched a thing on them and it said that they pretty much winter in the same tiny area down in Central America somewhere, if I remember right.
Right.
And they found out where
it's a 2-year cycle. They're like a year down there and then a year up here type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. Well, I mean, you think of a teeny little butterfly flying that far.
Yeah.
Wow.
It does, though.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah, that's just amazing. Well, and you got some of these birds that are up in the Arctic Circle during the summer, and in the winter, they're down in Central America or South America, and you're like, geez, guys, like traveling much? What the hell? You don't have to go that far for food. That's like overkill. Oh, it must be nice on the other side of the planet right now. Let's fly there. Okay. a lot of extra effort. And of course, and then you run into the problems with the animals wanting to migrate and people taking advantage of it along the way, which is what happened a lot with the, back when my dad was a kid, there was ridiculous amount of ducks and stuff in North America. And those big, gigantic flocks of ducks got wiped out a whole lot by hunters back in
Is
the
that
early
right?
part of the 20th century.
That's a
And
shame.
yeah, although they're recovering, they still haven't completely recovered from it. Because back then, that was like, what's a bag limit? You know, shoot as many ducks as you want. Who cares? And the Great Depression, everybody's starving anyway, so they're shooting anything that moves, so they got extra meat to eat. That's what happened to all the deer and stuff down in the southern part of the U.S.
No
You know,
kidding.
deer all gone. Well, now we'll eat possums and gators, turtles, whatever else. All those weird recipes. That's where that came from. People starving, figure out recipes for things that happen to live nearby.
Right.
Let's see, what else can we talk about? Have you ever had any kind of a paranormal or weird experience that you could chalk up?
Well, you know, people used to ask me that a lot, and I could never come up with anything. But just recently, I think I saw a ghost.
Whoa, where? Not at your house, right?
No, I was actually at a
Okay, good.
like a 7-Eleven convenience store, and I bought my beer or my tobacco or whatever. I wanted to go out the door, right? But there were people coming in. There's some children, 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a grandmother. She was like real thin. And I thought, okay, I gotta, even though, I have to be polite and let the grandmother by, I'm still thinking, I have to wait here while all these guys come in. I was just about to go out the door, right? So, and I'm watching them all the time, so I know as soon as they get in, I'm gonna get out of the store, right? So the little kids come in first, the 5-year-old, the 6-year-old, and then the 10-year-old comes in, and then there's no old woman anymore. I thought, well, I can get out of the store now. I walk out of the store, I look all around, there's no one around, like nobody.
Whoa.
So I thought maybe she was attached to them somehow.
Yeah, well, that would be typical for some of that ghostly behavior. There's Granny still following the kids around,
Right.
keeping an eye on them. Wow,
Right.
that's creepy. Did she seem like fully formed real person? There was no
It seemed like a
haziness
real
or-
person, and I was waiting for her to come in, but then all of a sudden, as soon as the kids got in, she wasn't there. I went out immediately. I looked to the left, to the right. There was no one in the car at the gas pump. There was no one out there.
Yeah, that would have been a little bit disturbing. Oh man,
Yeah, it
was. Make sure that you're kind to everyone. Safety first, last, and always. Pay it forward. Don't be mean to people if you don't have to be. Don't flip off the mountain giant. Don't poke Dogman with a stick. Don't punt the puck, would you? And for God's sake, whatever you do not hug the Wookiee.